lucky today. We have a really renowned storyteller with us, Miss Gayle Ross. She's Cherokee from Oklahoma, and so she's here to share some of her storytelling with you all. So we appreciate you coming to the museum this afternoon and coming for this program. So I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It's interesting these days. We all have a lot of skills and practice time interacting with one another through a click or a keyboard or an iPhone or a tweet. I have not yet learned to tweet, have no intention of learning to tweet, but it's funny how sometimes we forget what face-to-face time feels like. Sio Nigada Dohiju. Hi guys, how are you? Sio, or Osio, is how we say hello in Cherokee. Dohiju means how are you? And if you're doing good, you say Osta. Osta, good. As you heard, my name is Gayle Ross, and I am an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation, the second largest tribe in the country, second only to our Navajo brothers and sisters. You may know that the Cherokee people are originally from the Southeast. Our homelands encompassed parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, North Tennessee, North Alabama, all of Kentucky, parts of Virginia, and West Virginia. But beginning first with the British and later with the Americans, treaty by treaty, land cession by land cession, finally, by the 1820s, only the heart of our nation was left, and that was North Georgia, North Alabama, Western North Carolina, and Eastern Tennessee. And when Andrew Jackson was president, and my great-great-great-grandfather was principal chief, the Cherokee were forcibly removed through a fraudulent treaty, forced away from their homeland in the Smoky Mountains, all the way to what is now Oklahoma, which is where the Cherokee Nation is today. Our capital is Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Now, even though I live there now, I was born and raised in what my Cherokee relatives like to call Baja, Oklahoma, Texas. But I was very lucky, because my grandmother lived with my family when I was young. And from the time that I was small, I loved stories. Cherokee stories and Cherokee history. I grew up with stories of my ancestors, especially Principal Chief Ross and the Trail of Tears. Stories that the Cherokee have handed down for as long as there have been Cherokees. And I was very young when I began learning and telling these stories myself. Do you know the first time I told a story to an audience that wasn't my brothers, sisters, and assorted cousins was when I was in the 3rd grade. How many 3rd graders? That's how old I was when I told my first story. And it happened because I forgot my homework, which is how, of course, some of the best stories get told. Now, they don't do this to you guys as much, but back in the dark ages when I was in school, they used to make us memorize long poems. Some of you here are nodding your heads. You remember that torture. You had to stand up in front of everybody and recite your poem. And I got to school one day and I remembered that I forgot to memorize a poem. But I'm a quick thinker when I'm in trouble. So I stood up and I said, I chose not to memorize a poem. Instead, I will share with you an ancient traditional story of my people. And the teacher fell for it. So right off the top of my head, I told a story I'd heard my grandmother tell many times, a story about our trickster, G-Stew, Rabbit. You'll hear more about him. And a trick that Rabbit played on Possum that makes Possum have that ugly naked tail. Well, if you get to say naked tail out loud to a room full of 3rd graders, you're going to be a big hit. So I didn't know it, but my life's work was beginning. For the past 30 years, I've traveled the country telling stories, talking about Cherokee history. I go to schools and libraries and colleges and festivals, and the Museum of the American Indian is a place where I have been many times, and I cannot thank the staff and Mandy Foster for making my return visit possible. I love this museum. It is a beating Native heart right in the middle of Washington. I want to start with a story, though, that I did not know when I was a kid. I wish I'd known it. It would have made me feel better. It's about a bird with big feet. I have big feet. These are size 11s. I was a 10, but I grew a half a size every time I gave birth to a child. That's why I only have 2 kids. I found this story written down in some of my grandmother's papers when I was an adult, and I really, really love it. It has a little song in it. If I teach you the song, will you help me tell the story? Yeah. It's really very simple. It's 2 verses, and each verse is 1 line sung 3 times with a little tagline on the end. The first line is De Gano Gi G-Squaw. Can you say that? De Gano Gi G-Squaw. And the tagline is G-Squaw Us Di. Say that. G-Squaw Us Di. Now when you sing it, it sounds like De Gano Gi G-Squaw. De Gano Gi G-Squaw. De Gano Gi G-Squaw. G-Squaw Us Di. Some of you are already joining in. That's great. The second verse is Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Again, sung 3 times. And again, G-Squaw Us Di as a tagline. Let's try it. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. G-Squaw Us Di. Very good. Okay, let's try the whole thing top to bottom. De Gano Gi G-Squaw, sung 3 times. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Ready? De Gano Gi G-Squaw, sing. De Gano Gi G-Squaw. De Gano Gi G-Squaw. G-Squaw Us Di. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. Ah Tla We Di G-Squaw. G-Squaw Us Di. Boy, you guys are good. Do you have any idea what you're singing? You're very trusting people. De Ganoki, singing. G-Squaw, bird. Ah Tla We Di, flying. G-Squaw, bird. G-Squaw Us Di, little bird. Us Di is a modifier, means little, and it's also our word for baby. So you're singing, the bird is singing, the bird is singing, the bird is singing, little bird. The bird is flying, the bird is flying, the bird is flying, little bird. Inspiring lyrics, aren't they? But you see, they really are. Because in the beginning days of the world, this bird would not fly with the other birds. This bird would not sing with the other birds. He spent his days hiding in the tall grass where no one could see him. This bird's name is meadowlark. Have you ever seen a meadowlark or seen a picture of a meadowlark? He's really very handsome. He has a bright yellow vest, a little black and white necklace he wears around his throat. But meadowlark couldn't see any of that. All he could see was that Creator had given him enormous feet. And he was so embarrassed by the size of his feet that he hid where no one could see him. He would sit there in the tall grass and sulk, saying things like, "Creator made a mistake. These are eagle's feet." And he was hiding there one day when a grasshopper came along. Have you ever noticed how busy the little bug people are? You never see a bug person just kicking back and chilling. You know, bug people are always going, always scurrying, always flying, always jumping. And that's the way it was with that grasshopper. He was hopping along through the tall grass, and boom, he bumped smack into Meadowlark. He picked himself up. He shook himself off. He said, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. You're a bird. Birds belong in trees. I'm a bug. Bugs live on the ground. Birds don't live on the ground. Birds are supposed to be in the trees. I'm supposed to be here. I'm a bug. You're a bird. What are you doing here?" Meadowlark said, "I'm afraid to come out where the others can see me. They will laugh at my feet." Grasshopper said, "Your feet, your feet. What's so funny about your feet? I never saw a foot do anything funny before. Why would people laugh at your..." I see your point.
Because his feet are big.
They are. But Grasshopper, he said, "You know, you don't fly with your feet. You fly with your wings. You don't sing with your feet. You sing with your voice. You're a bird. Act like one." And Grasshopper went on about his way. And Meadowlark, he thought about what Grasshopper had said, and he thought, maybe I'm just being silly. Maybe nobody will even notice my feet. So he flew to the top of the tree, he closed his eyes, he threw his head back, and he sang. And he sang loud, he sang happy, he sang, "Deganoki chi squaw, sing, Deganoki chi squaw, Deganoki chi squaw, chi squaw, ooh-ee. Ah-twa-wee-dee chi squaw, ah-twa-wee-dee chi squaw, ah-twa-wee-dee chi squaw, chi squaw, ooh-ee." And do you know, of all the gifts Creator gave Meadowlark, the most beautiful one of all was his voice? When he started singing, all the birds flew to that tree and sat there listening to him sing. All the animal people gathered at the foot of the tree, looking up at this wonderful new singer. So when Meadowlark finished his song and looked around, there everybody was, staring at him. And what do you think he thought they were staring at? His big feet. He flew back down to the tall grass, and nothing anyone could say would make him come out. Now, as wise as he is, Grasshopper was wrong about one thing. There are birds that live on the ground, and one of them is the little quail, the little bobwhite. And there was a little mother quail that year that accidentally built her nest in a field of wheat that the human beings had planted. When she made her nest and laid her eggs, the wheat was no taller than the fields of tall grass around it. But after she laid her eggs, and as she sat there tending them, that wheat just kept getting taller. And looking at it, Mother Quail realized what she had done. And she started to worry. What if the people came to cut the wheat before her eggs had hatched? And sure enough, one day, she heard two people standing at the edge of the wheat field, talking about how everyone in the village would come and work together to harvest that wheat the very next day. And little Mother Quail, she knew that when the human beings walked through the wheat field with their big feet, someone would step on the nest and she would lose her babies. She started to cry and call for someone to help her. She called, "Gu-quay, gu-quay, gu-quay, nani-wei-ee, 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 nani-wei-ee." This is little Quail calling. And you know who heard her singing? Grasshopper. Grasshopper rushed to Mother Quail's nest, and when he found out what was wrong, he said, "Well, we'll just move your eggs. They're not safe in the wheat field. They'll be safe in tall grass. We'll move from the wheat field to the tall grass because they'll be safe in tall grass. They're not safe in the wheat field. We'll just move your eggs." But you know, Grasshopper, he and Mother Quail, they weren't big enough to lift the eggs over the side of the nest. If you've ever seen the nest of a ground nesting bird, they're very deep and the bottom is lined with everything that Mother Quail could find to make it soft and safe for those eggs. When they found that they couldn't move the eggs, Mother Quail was ready to start crying again. But Grasshopper said, "Wait a minute. I know someone who can help." And he went and he got Meadowlark and he brought him to that nest. And those big, ugly feet were just big enough to pick up Mother Quail's eggs. So 2 at a time, Meadowlark airlifted Mother Quail's eggs out of the wheat field to the tall grass, and she built a new nest there. And hiding there the way he was, Meadowlark watched while she sat on those eggs, tending them so carefully. He watched when the day came that pop, 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 all those eggs hatched. And he watched when the day came that little Mother Quail, her head so proud and happy, she started off for a walk, and right behind her came that row of beautiful little baby birds. They looked like feathery little ping pong balls rolling along behind her. And when Meadowlark saw that, he thought, "These feet are ugly. I am so proud of them." And he flew back to the top of the tree. He threw back his head and he started to sing. And do you know, if anything, his song was sweeter than ever before. Because you see, Meadowlark had learned something important. And I hope it's what you'll remember anytime you think of this story. It's not the way you look, it's the way you see. Do you look out in the world and do you see a family that loves you and that you love? Do you look around the world and you see a neighborhood or a community or a church or a tribe that you belong to, and you look out for each other and you take care of each other? Do you look around the world and do you see one nation made up of many, many peoples, a nation that will learn to live together in tolerance and respect? It's not the way you look, it's the way you see. They got no tee squaw. They got no tee squaw. They got no tee squaw. Tee squaw, ooh, tee. Aqua-wee-dee-dee, squaw. Aqua-wee-dee-dee, squaw. Aqua-wee-dee-dee, squaw. Gee, squaw, ooh-wee-wee. Wado. Thank you. Now, as I said in the beginning, the very first story I ever told was a rabbit story, which was entirely appropriate because almost everybody knows a rabbit story. If you're Cherokee, you know who Rabbit is. He is our trickster. He is always in trouble, and he is always the troublemaker. You probably don't know anybody like that, huh?
I think Peter Rabbit.
Rabbit's in trouble because he talks all the time. He doesn't care if he knows what he's talking about or not. That's not the point. The point is his voice sounds good. He talked, he talked, he talked, he talked, he talks, he talks, he talks some more. He talked so much in the beginning that Unetlana, Creator, the one who made everything, Creator came along, scooped him up, and said, "Geez, Stu, you don't listen. I'm going to help you listen better." Took hold of Rabbit's ears. That's how come Rabbit's ears stick up. But it didn't help. He still talked too much, and he loves to play tricks. Nothing makes Rabbit happier than playing a trick. And sometimes, as in the case I mentioned earlier of the trick he played on Possum, it works out just the way he wants it to. But other times, he ends up tricking only himself, as he did in this story. You see, a long time ago, when the animals could talk and the people could understand them, or as my grandmother would say, when everybody spoke the same language and except for killing and eating each other, they got along pretty good. In those days, the animals had all the same things the people did. They had an animal tribal council. They had an animal versus the birds annual stickball game. They had stomp dances, and they had an honor dance. Now, an honor dance is just what it sounds like. It's a dance that's held to honor somebody. If you've ever been to a powwow today, a modern day powwow, you will see the modern equivalent. There are many times when somebody during a powwow will want to honor somebody in the family. Say a young Indian man or Indian woman has just graduated from medical school and is coming back to work on the reservation and give back to their own people. Well, then they might have an honor dance, and the family calls for the dance, and the drummers are paid to sing a certain song, and that person steps out and they begin to dance, and their family falls in line behind them, and then their friends, and then everyone else, but they lead that whole dance. Well, in the old days, an honor dance didn't last for one song, it lasted all night. And the very first honor dance came at the end of a contest among the birds to see who could fly the highest. Who do you think that would be?
The bird.
Which bird is the strongest? The eagle. Little bat. Bat hid himself in Eagle's neck feathers. So when Eagle had flown as high as he could, Bat stood up. And he always claimed he should have had the honor dance because his head was higher than Eagle's. They danced for Eagle, not for Bat. After that, they said, let's have an honor dance for the animal with the most beautiful fur coat. Oh, the talk and the arguing and the yelling and the crying and screaming and shouting. Everybody thought their own coat was the most beautiful. Raccoon was very proud of those black stripes on his tail. Skunk was very proud of that shiny white stripe that runs down his back. But remember what I said about the person leading the honor dance? No one wanted to dance right behind Skunk all night long. Now, Rabbit, he knew that his own fur coat was not that special, but he was very proud of that big bushy tail that Creator gave him. So he was jealous when the animals voted and they all agreed that the animal with the most beautiful fur coat was Otter. Have you ever seen an otter? Or second best, an otter stole or an otter coat? Otter's fur is so thick and shiny and beautiful. At last they found someone they could all agree on. So the word went out that the next honor dance would be for Otter. Now, Rabbit already felt bad enough, but he's the messenger. He talks so much, the animals figured they might as well give him something to say. So they made that his job, to spread the news. So it was Rabbit's job to go get Otter and bring him back to the dance ground. Well, as he's going along toward Otter's house, Rabbit came up with what he thought was a pretty good idea. He would steal Otter's fur coat. He would put it on. He would go to the honor dance. And the animals would believe that he was Otter, and he would get to lead the dance all night long. It's not easy to think of a way to steal another animal's fur coat, but Rabbit, he had a good idea. He told Otter about the dance. Now, if you know otters, if say you've been to the zoo and you've been to the otter exhibit and you see them splashing and swimming, playing with each other.
I've never seen the otters.
In those days, they didn't splash and play. They lived beside the river, but they never went in it. They were afraid of the water. But they played all the time. Gentle, loving, giving hearts. That's Otter. So Otter was very humble and pleased that the animals wanted to pay him this honor. So he agreed to travel back with Rabbit. But they hadn't gone very far when Rabbit insisted that they camp for the night. Oh, this is a power place where we are. This is a sacred place on the river. Something happens here that doesn't happen anywhere else. Sometimes in the middle of the night, fire falls from the sky. Just falls down from the sky. Very powerful. We should camp here. And you should dream here before your dance. But take off that fur coat. Hang it in a tree. If the fire falls from the sky, and it's looking a little that way tonight, you don't want to burn a hole in it. Well, Otter believed him. He took off his beautiful fur coat. He hung it in a tree. And he went to sleep stretched out right next to the water. Because Rabbit told him if the fire falls from the sky, you have to jump in the river. So when Otter was asleep, Rabbit took a curved piece of bark and scraped all the coals from the campfire into it. Then he went and he stood right over where Otter was sleeping, and he threw the coals into the air as high as he could, and they began raining down from the sky. He shook Otter and he said, "Fire falling from the sky." And Otter saw those coals falling down. He dove into the river, and as soon as the water closed over him, Rabbit snatched that coat from the tree and ran. And the next night, he was back at the dance ground, and there was no sign of Otter. So when the sun went down and the drums began to play and the singers began to call for everyone to dance, Rabbit put on Otter's fur coat. It was a little tight in the middle, but Rabbit thought he looked pretty good. He was just fixing to come out where everyone could see him when he remembered something. Think about Rabbit's nose. That split in his nose that makes it wiggle so funny, that's another story. But Rabbit knew that if the others saw his nose, they would know he wasn't Otter, so he put one paw over his nose. And that's how he danced all night long. And if anybody said anything to him, he just said, "This is the latest dance." And of course, everyone wanted to do the latest dance. So soon everybody was dancing around with their paws over their noses, except for Bear. Bear is a good friend of Otter's. And all evening long, he was curious because his old friend was just not acting like himself. So when Bear got a chance, he danced over, he knocked that paw away, and there was Rabbit's split nose. Everybody screamed, "Rabbit!" Rabbit threw Otter's coat down and ran. But Bear was so angry that Rabbit would play such a mean trick on such a gentle person as Otter that when Rabbit dashed by, Bear reached out, grabbed that beautiful long bushy tail, and broke it off. You've never seen a rabbit with a long bushy tail since, have you? You won't see a rabbit with a long bushy tail because all of Rabbit's descendants, they just have that little puff of white fur. Looks like scar tissue, doesn't it? Well, the other animals, they took Otter's coat and they headed back to find him. And they found him coming down the river. And he was glad to get his coat back. But you know, when the animals offered to hold another dance for him, he said, "No, that's okay. I don't mind." You see, something new had come into Otter's life. Until Rabbit tricked him into jumping in the river, he had never been swimming. And he discovered he liked swimming better than anything. So when you look at Rabbit's grandchildren and you see that short tail, if you're looking for Otter's grandchildren, look in the rivers and the lakes and the streams, because all the otters have been swimming in the water from that day to this. Thank you. Thank you.